Welcome back to the show, everybody, from beautiful Dana Point in my favorite conference of all time. Every year I look forward to it, the LSI Emerging MedTech Summit. We're here in Dana Point, it's 2024, and I'm joined by my good friend, Sewu-Steve Tawia, who's the managing partner of a very interesting fund. It's called Rift Valley Ventures, correct?
Correct.
And essentially what you're doing is, and again, it's a beautiful name that I really love, you're bridging the gap in medtech and biotech to bring investments and fund companies in Africa.
Absolutely. First, thank you very much for having me. Really made a 20-hour trip to come over. It's really an honor to be here with you, Omar, on this podcast. So maybe to give you a bit of an insight, Jaza means in Swahili to bridge. Rift was usually for the Rift Valley, but also for the risk for investment in early stage investments across the continent. And the whole idea is really to support companies in the pre-seed to Series A stage in digital health, medtech, and biotech on the continent.
Fantastic, fantastic. So let me start by asking you this. The thing that if you look at macroeconomics and geopolitically in the world, Africa's GDP is on the rise mainly because of the resources that are in Africa, the population there, and more importantly, while it's a very diverse country, there's a diverse continent with a lot of different countries there, right? Culturally, there's this interest to launch new companies and bring innovations to Africa.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. I think what transpires most of the time is that when you're out of Africa, and even within Africa, we don't know our respective countries that much. So imagine somebody is out there and you talk about Africa, they think it's one country.
Right.
But it's 54 countries, really.
And very different, even within their own country.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what we realize is that for us, one of the key reasons why we believe long-term, 15, 20 years from now, we can build an investment company that will be very successful is that there's really four mega trends that are really driving growth, despite, I would say, global recessions sometime and crunch in terms of capital. There's a huge underlying opportunity, a wave, mega trends, I call them, that really makes the continent very interesting. One is massive population growth. So today we're 1.4 billion. It is expected to be 2.5 billion by 2050. And 50% of the population is urbanized as of today, and that's going to increase going forward. But guess what? The most striking number is really that Africa has a median age of 18 years old.
A median age. And compare that to the other places in the world,
Exactly.
just for our audience.
Yeah. So when you look at that, maybe United States probably 47, right? Europe 51.
And essentially, most populations there, I don't want to say they're dying off, but they are dying off, and it's a huge issue. Right? But in Africa, you don't have this issue, right? The population is growing.
Absolutely. Growing population, more than double in the next 30 years. And the whole point is the mega trend is really supported by that youth bulge. Hopefully it's not going to risk, but it's positive, right? And so all these young people need jobs, create jobs, and have jobs going forward. The other mega trend that we see is digitization of the economy. Right? Not as fast as other areas like the United States, but there's a huge trend in digitization across major industries. And one of the things that does is that we can leapfrog. So instead of having to build rails, and we still actually need to, but that's another story, but having to build infrastructure the way it has been built so far, guess what? A company like Starlink is enable anybody in the bush in the remote areas to get access to 100 megabyte second internet. Now we bring in solar energy, right? Solar powered energy. That means that in a remote area, you can have a thriving ecosystem of people who have used solar power, get data, and then start developing innovations right there and then. You don't need to have the infrastructure that a lot of the more developed countries have had to develop to get there. And the last point is, the fourth mega trend is the fact that, contrary to the doom and gloom during COVID and after, where we're saying, oh, African economies are going to go bust, et cetera, it has come down, but not because of COVID really, but more because of the cash crunch that happened after, where when the US interest rates went up, a lot of the money that was in emerging market was sucked in back to the US, right? And so today, when you look at the fundraising, venture capital on the continent went from 1.2 billion 5 years ago to the peak at 4.6 billion. Now, 2023, venture capital investment on the continent went down to 2.4, depending on the numbers and which database you're looking at. And the trend is back up this year. So going forward, when you compare that to global fundraising and investment in tech, we're just bound to grow. Youth bulge, digitization, and also mobile, using mobile, youth bulge, and then urbanization. And these are the key mega trends. So microeconomically, what we believe as Jaza Ventures is that we're sitting on the cusp of a massive growth in digital health because of access to more data and devices, medical devices, homegrown and international ones who can essentially help us achieve what we call better healthcare for all.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Now, let me ask you, for Jaza Rift, tell me a little bit about the team. You know, you guys are trying to convince, LPs from around the world that they need, if they're going to park their money, they should park money with you because you'll be able to deploy it. Tell us a little bit about the team and a little bit more about the fund thesis in terms of not just the 4 trends you mentioned, but the kind of companies you look at.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. So, our thesis is very simple. Today, if you're at home or in the office or in transit in between, if anything happens to you, we should be able to bring healthcare to you and take you to a healthcare facility when it's needed. So that means that when we look at the 3 verticals that we work on, digital health, MedTech, and biotech, there's an opportunity to create some sort of conveyor belt between all these solutions to bring healthcare to you. And we have a number of examples. And so our thesis is to invest 40 to 50% of our portfolio into digital health solutions, telemedicine, EMR, EHRs, InsurTech, health, mental health, et cetera, solutions that are driven by digital. And then in medical devices, our key criteria are around affordability, quality, they have to be US FDA, CE marked, or local FDA approved, and also accessibility, to make it accessible for all. And so our thesis is really revolving around investing 200 to 2 million in pre-seed seed to Series A startups on the continent that help us achieve superior returns across the continent by scaling those companies, but also true healthcare, positive healthcare outcomes.
Fantastic. Jaza, where are you guys headquartered right now?
So we are a GPLP in Delaware. Right, Delaware structure. We're raising $50 million, and the whole idea is to have an advisor in Kenya that advises the company and the GP and LP structure in Delaware. So we're fully compliant going forward with most of the regulations that are in Delaware. Yeah.
So for the show, I'm very grateful that we've had more family offices and private investors listen in because they may be coming from different industries, but they're interested in MedTech. In the United States, when you think about like MedTech, biotech, and I know I might leave some cities out, so for my audience, don't get offended, but I'm just naming the big ones. When you think about the industry in the United States, a lot of those companies are concentrated in San Francisco Bay Area, Southern California, Boston. Now one of the emerging ones is Miami, and then I would also throw in there Houston and Austin. When you look at the continent of Africa, when it comes to the MedTech scene, biotech scene, where do you see a lot of the pockets of innovation emerging?
I mean, I'm really great that you mentioned that. It's really depending on, again, digital health, MedTech, or biotech.
Let's start with MedTech, and let's do biotech and then digital health.
So on the MedTech side, I would say, for me, the top 3 or 4 clusters of really deep MedTech experience started with South Africa. South Africa has 2 main clusters from my experience. One is around Johannesburg, and then the other one is the cluster, Stellenbosch and Cape Town, where there's a lot of innovation hubs around MedTech and biotech, but a lot of MedTech, with partnership with international organizations. So South Africa is one, with Joburg, Cape Town, Stellenbosch clusters. The other one is actually Kenya. So around Nairobi, there are a number of solutions that are being organized. And for the audience, we're organizing Transforming African MedTech Conference in Nairobi, Kenya, 28th to 30th of August. So do reach out if you want to participate. And then the third one, I would say, and the fourth one would probably be Ghana to some extent, Nigeria. I would say Ghana and Nigeria is kind of at the same level, but very clearly, Egypt has a huge opportunity in MedTech on the continent.
Fascinating. And what about in the biotech side? How does that disperse?
Oh, biotech by far, South Africa and the cluster, Stellenbosch, Cape Town, is the dominant. So there are a lot of, and they've been at it for a long time. And funny enough, not many people remember when COVID hit, some people were saying, oh, this South African disease. We're hearing that.
Yeah, I remember that.
But actually not, because South Africa has a long history on producing top-level research, and they were able to detect the strains upfront.
And your infection rates, I think, were lower during COVID as well.
Absolutely.
Because there was a period that people were saying, like, why, you know, if you look in Africa, especially South Africa, the infection rates were really low. And then that's where, like, a lot of theories came out, like, is it because, you know...
We're stronger.
Strong, or Africans get more they have higher vitamin D, for example, these kind of things.
It's really because it was much earlier detection thanks to the deep biotech knowledge in South Africa, right? And so South Africa, number one on biotech, I would say there's a kind of challenge between Egypt, Tunisia, and Ghana to some extent. But I would say that there are quite leading companies in these three countries. Notably, I don't know if you know, but there was a major exit on the continent last year. BioNTech bought for $750 million InstaDeep of Tunisia, and that was a major exit.
That was a major one.
Not many people talked about it. They always preferred to mention fintech and other sectors, whereas they were a major exit. And so I would want to mention a couple of companies that I feel really are pushing the needle on the biotech side as well. Within Egypt, there's Nawa Scientific, really doing great work. There's Remedy, also in Egypt. And then in Ghana, you've got Yamachi Biotech and Revna Biosciences doing great things. In Nigeria, it's coming, but I think they went through a few challenges, so I'm waiting for a few new companies to come out. Finally, maybe on those points, MedTech, Biotech, and some like digital health, what I've noticed over the last 4 years is that actually founders who were maybe in fintech, e-commerce, retail tech, reg tech, a lot of them are actually with clear insight coming to healthcare. And so I'm seeing more people, founders, second, third time founders, who are actually thinking, actually, I could make money in healthcare on the continent, and they're setting up companies to do so. I have a very striking example from Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria.
I want to hear this. I want to hear the example. Tell me.
Oh, no problem. So there's a company that came up to me, and the founder exited from Tribs, which is a logistics company between Nigeria and Ghana. And he started looking at the healthcare ecosystem, talked to me about it, wanted me to come as an angel to set up Rivian Healthcare. And so he launched a company, but this gentleman doesn't have any healthcare experience, right? So he's a second-time founder, and then build a team to support a healthcare facility, and then build a whole solutions around it. So, and he's not the only one. As I said, there are a number of people who are coming to me saying, actually, I know you're a healthcare fund. Can you tell me about this model or this idea I have? And I'll just give them a feedback, right? One key thing that is critical to understand is that now people are realizing that they cannot copy and paste a model from outside and bring it to the continent. So, for instance, in biotech, and I'm using biotech usually loosely in my conversations because when everybody thinks biotech, it's really life science, clinical trial, drug development over a number of years until you get one out of maybe 1,000 molecule that's going to make it, right? We're actually thinking more tech bio. So data-driven research based on the data we collect through the various companies that we have that are really going to fast-track the drug development down there, but are really driven by data science, machine learning, to collect the data and calculate probabilities of success of one molecule over another before you get to the wet labs.
Fascinating. And so that's interesting because, at least for an investor, rather than having 1,000 molecules, which is going to put a longer timeline, maybe 10 years, maybe you have half that, maybe even less, with a much shorter timeline. Because I think in the biotech realm, the acquisition part is so important because you need acquisitions to happen because, you know, a lot of these larger companies like Merck, Pfizer, and everything are the ones who can fund these like later phase
CapEx.
trials.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to get these to market, sometimes your next trial is going to cost $500 million, $1 billion, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
fascinating. And that's the first time I've heard that, which is tech bio, but it makes so much sense.
Look, I don't know why. I've been talking about tech bio for more than a year and a half, and suddenly I even know that tech.bio domain name has been bought. And so many other people are talking about that. But for us, as a fund, what we thought was that if we were going to do really life science, biotech, instead of being a $50 million fund, we should be 500, right? And again, as an emerging manager, to convince LPs on one, Africa, healthcare in Africa, early stage healthcare in Africa, where you're doing digital, medtech, and biotech, right? I know it's a hard bargain, but I'm convinced that the investment opportunity is there. That's why we went at it. And so for us, when we look at, we're an investor in Grosvenor Biosciences in Ghana. Grosvenor has built a level 3 facility in Ghana, one of the only ones in West Africa. They're doing CRO work. They're developing top-notch level of clinical trials with different organizations. There's even a news that came up. They're working with AstraZeneca, for instance. And the whole idea is to build a data set with African data to start driving drug development down the road, but data-driven. It's not biotech, it's tech bio. Yeah.
And it makes sense too, especially in the last couple of years. You know, ChatGPT really popularized things, but with these LLM models coming out and the way that AI can essentially be applied, you know, very small teams can essentially use these to, you know, essentially scale things out. And I think using it on molecules is one area, but the other area is just, you know, managing the company, SOPs, these things, because
absolutely
you stretch a dollar out. Yeah, exactly.
Fast track.
Exactly.
Actually, can I tell you why BioNTech bought InstaDeep?
Please.
InstaDeep was created by Karim Beguir, a Tunisian French gentleman. Went to the top schools in France, came back to Tunisia, co-founded the company InstaDeep with some friends, and started working on machine learning AI models for different industries. One of the biggest actually customers is the German government to manage all the trains, logistics. Like all the way the trains in Germany synchronize with each other and managing the whole thing. And so they started in different vertical industries, but where they got a breakout was during COVID, BioNTech was looking to try to develop a new drug fast, and they had been working with InstaDeep on a regular basis, but essentially it's because of the data science, machine learning, deep expertise that InstaDeep has that BioNTech managed to develop their drug much faster, and then say, look, actually, we need to buy you out. That's the story. And for us, as a fund manager, we actually have an internal project that is also looking for grant funding called Project Melezo. Melezo in Swahili means information or detail. And the whole thesis is to say, look, why don't we build an internal tech team that's going to be machine learning and data-driven, to, one, help accelerate our investment process as an investor, but also have that backbone to support our companies to use AI and machine learning to accelerate their growth. And so that's where we're also working on. We believe that, as I mentioned to you, with the technologies available, we can bring healthcare to you faster and bring you to healthcare facilities that is needed. And by doing all the work we're doing on the machine learning AI side, we want to do internally, we can screen companies faster, identify their potential faster, risk also, but also help them transform themselves using machine learning and AI for, if it's digital health, identifying much faster maybe cataract issues with machine learning and AI. MedTech, same thing, we can identify maybe medical device as a service or software as a medical device rather, also, and then on same thing on tech bio. Now that I've defined tech bio, I can talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, your fund thesis is very interesting in the sense about, within Africa, finding ways, and it's not just Africa, by the way. I think the one thing that happened during COVID is that we all got used to doing things from home, including our healthcare.
Absolutely.
And so when that was done, nobody has the interest to go to a hospital for anything, not even a clinic.
Yeah.
For myself, even with my primary care, every time I have an appointment, every year I ask, can we just do this virtually?
Yeah.
I don't want to leave. Even some of the blood draws that I did, I had somebody come to my home. I don't want to go anywhere. Yeah. So knowing that, when you look at the African population and all the different problems that can be solved in Africa and applied to the rest of the globe,
absolutely,
right? Because the problems in here in America, whether it's in a rural area or urban, is the same as it is in Africa. There's so many different problems to solve.
Absolutely.
So what are some areas that your fund is looking to invest in terms of problem solved? Yeah. And feel free to mention companies by name.
No problem. So look, it actually illustrated one of our theses in terms of building for Africa, but also for the world. So that's what I've realized also, is that once we started talking to people about this thesis, people reached out to us, said, look, don't you have a medical device that is CE mark or USFDA approved, that is quality and is affordable, that we actually can tech transfer to the US? What does it tell you? That means that the solutions we're developing for low resource environment are actually applicable anywhere else.
And you said something very important, in a low resource environment.
Exactly, yes.
Because even in the US, that's the one thing, whether it's a strategic or investor is trying to understand is that, okay, this problem that we're going to solve, can it be done in a low resource environment?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because considering all the macroeconomic factors happening in the world these days, I mean, it takes a lot of money to take a medical device to market.
Yeah.
But you want to be as efficient with that capital as possible.
Absolutely. The unit economics around all these things is very critical. And I think you mentioned one of the things that also we advise with the partnership we have with Vilgro Africa, who has deep expertise in terms of regulatory approvals. We help companies locally go through that regulatory approval process and help them navigate and figure out, okay, how should I apply to any of the local regulatory approvals, regional ones, but then have a pathway to hack to international ones as well. And so usually, for instance, if you're a company from Kenya, you've managed to have local regulatory approval and then regional one, we advise you actually go and get CE mark or USFDA or ISO certification before you get any of those ones, because that prepares you for scaling even on the continent. So once you get a USFDA, when you go to Nigeria and you say, oh, my product is USFDA approved, they don't ask you that many questions, right? But if you say it's just Kenya approved, it's Kenya approved, they say, okay, do we have a partnership? They ask too many questions. So it helps us fast track, go to market for a lot of these companies that way.
Interesting. I have, let's say, a hypothesis. Okay. And I want to present it to you, but I want you to see, I want to see what your thoughts are on this. Okay. So in the past, for MedTech companies, it was always a common path where you say, we have to, again, be capital efficient. You need to raise money, but you don't want to keep raising money and diluting, right? Yeah. So the thought is, you take your device, you do your clinical trials in Europe, get CE marketing, get some traction, some quick wins and everything, and then use that as a bridge to come for prime time in the US, do well, and then you get bought out. Yeah. The problem today, no offense to Europe, is that CE marking is now just as difficult as getting through the FDA. It's gotten more complicated.
Yeah.
Do you feel that leaves an opportunity for MedTech companies to say, you know what? We should go to Africa to do this, right? Or even investors say we should invest in Africa, but we can accomplish the same things faster in a low resource environment. Yeah. And then either at that point we can partner up with an acquisition from a strategic, or make it an easy move over to the US. Yeah,
I think that it has to be a two-pronged approach. So I'll explain why. A lot of times the opportunity set, because of the homogeneity of the US market, is much bigger, right? Because if you have a device that is USFDA approved, it can go from New York to San Francisco to Portland to Houston. It's not going to make a difference, right? It's the same, it's the same product. The challenge we're having on the continent is that unless you're already USFDA approved or CE mark, which is indeed harder and harder, because that's also the feedback I've had, then it's easier for you, obviously, to scale to Africa because you have the US FDA approval, right? The key thing you have to understand, though, is that if you have US FDA, you come to Nigeria, 220 million people, you have a pretty sizable market to go after, which is great. Next one is, for each country, you still have to go through the local process. Even if you have UFC, it fast tracks it, but still have to go. What I've always said is that if we can have a Pan-African body that gives us approval, so if you have US FDA, you go through the Pan-African body, and they're working on it. That says, okay, you're a US FDA or CE mark, and then you come to our own Pan-African body, that says, okay, you've done that there, we are low resource environment, is it affordable, because your prices cannot be ours, therefore we give you approval on that basis. So that means that it's much faster to scale going down the road. And they're working on it, I must say. But I think there's a pathway that has to look at. Maybe on the pathway, I'll mention something that we have. So today, Jaza is ventures, advisory, and labs. And I'll explain what. So the ventures is the fund, typical GPLB, 10-year fund, etc. Like vanilla. Advisory is transactional advisory, where we provide hospitals, clinics, specialty care centers on the continent with fundraising transactional advisory. So if any of those entities want to raise $5 million plus, we can help them do transactional advisory. The third one, which is Jaza Labs, is really for us, our internal, but also more and more external, idea generation engine, where we're having a venture studio, we're raising money for, precise, a launch pad, and generally what we call a corporate VC as a service, and I'll elaborate. So the launch pad is really, for any company, let's say you're coming from South Africa, you want to launch in Kenya, with the partnership with Vigro, we can help you, one, have initial customers, do introduction, help you to local registration, etc., to launch in Kenya. Same for Ghana, same for a few other countries that we're working with. That's the launch pad. But it's not only for companies in Africa, but also international ones. So I've spoken to a number of companies here who are interested in bringing their solutions to the continent. And I said, okay, fine. We can help you by you come to us, we help you launch the same way. So if it's Ghana, we're going to set you up, do local registration, get you through approvals, get you to initial customers. And the last point is corporate VC as a service. Essentially, we had different conversations with conglomerates, in some strategic investors who were saying, look, we don't have time to do early stage. We give you the money, or you help us set up a corporate internal VC fund, corporate VC, where you bring us the deal and we invest through an investment committee as a service. So, they pay us to do deal sourcing according to their mandate, and we help them find deals that correspond to their objective. And then within that also, we're doing more and more advisory on, the big farmers who are interested in coming to the continent or already there but want to diversify the relationship to see if there are other markets they can tap into. And also we're doing that, market entry, essentially.
Fantastic. Yeah. And what I love is that, while your name Jaza indicates you're bridging a gap and bridging the rift,
absolutely.
Right? But you're essentially serving as a central hub to Africa for all these different things. I know you love all your children.
Babies.
Yeah, you love all your babies. But, in kind of wrapping up, and again, I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us. Which one are you most, I don't want to say excited. You're excited about all of them, but, of what you just mentioned, what's kind of like the big initiative for you this year in 2024? All of them, of course, but there has to be a tip of the spear.
Sure, no, for sure. 2024 is, I want to close my $50 million fund.
Okay.
That's the main objective, right? Essentially because I believe that with more than 4,700 unique companies we're identified across the continent, we just touched the tip of the iceberg. Right? Mm-hmm. And this is for us just scraping data, having relationships, etc. I believe that this number can be doubled or tripled in the next 2 to 3 years instead of in terms of investment opportunities for homegrown startups. But also, I strongly believe that if any companies from out there wants to come to the continent, we can be the investors to support them to scale, right? Preferably pre-seed seed Series A. Beyond that, that would mean we need to raise another fund. But for now, let's focus on the task at work and build the ecosystem around that.
Fantastic. And then just a few questions about that fund.
Yeah.
You're trying to raise 50 million.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of investors are you looking for, and what check size roughly?
So I think for us, minimum check size for high net worth individual family office foundation is going to be 100,000. The institutionals, depending on if they're strategic or not, we can take as low as $1 million, essentially. Yeah. And really, for us, we want alignment of interest, and people who are truly interested in, funding a more commercial venture with I don't want to, name myself an impact fund, but we truly want to create better healthcare outcome. Our tagline is Jaza Ventures, better healthcare for Africa and the world.
Got it. Well, just in sort of wrapping up, for anybody who wants to learn more, where can they learn more? Where can they connect with you? I know you're active on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Yeah. So connect me with me on LinkedIn. Go on our website, jazarif.vc.
Jazarif.vc.
Jazarif.vc. Yeah. JAZARIFT.vc. One Z.
Got it. So a lot of our listeners listen on the
Jazz.
website. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So
JAZARIFT.vc. And very, very soon we're going to launch a new one, .com.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm so happy that we became friends and met each other. I'm looking forward to having you back on the show to give updates on the fund, on the venture side, and of course, get some of your portfolio companies on our shows.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the time, Omar.
My pleasure.
I really appreciately.
Absolutely. Thank you.